morning, everyone. I'm Ranjan. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Sardine. We are a global company. I'm based out of San Francisco. We have a global presence. I have a pretty large team here in Toronto as well, about 25 people, in all disciplines, engineering, compliance, sales, etc. And we work with about 400 institutions globally. It includes a mixture of banks, fintechs, payment processors, as well as digital-first businesses, so crypto exchanges, gift card exchanges, ticketing, anywhere where you're buying any goods which are digital in nature. So today I'll be speaking about the rise of agentic fraud ops. I'm a machine learning engineer by training, and at Sardine, we are an agentic risk platform. So we provide agentic solutions as well as machine learning-based solutions to fight both fraud and financial crime. So today I'll take you through a journey of what we are seeing in the industry when it comes to fraud and how we are using AI to fight back. Cool. So yeah, so that was me. That's me really quickly. So I have a PhD in computer science from Rice University, and I have spent pretty much my entire career fighting fraud. Prior to founding Sardine, I used to lead fraud and financial crime for companies like Coinbase and Revolut. And Sardine, we founded 6 years ago. So the first question I'm going to pose is, are we actually truly ready for fully autonomous AI agent perpetrating fraud? Right? I think we are already seeing bits and pieces of that in action. Of course, in the world of security, everyone is very concerned about the capabilities of Mythos, the new AI tool, which is still in beta mode, which Anthropic has said can actually perpetrate intrusion or cybersecurity attacks that no one has ever thought of. So in a similar vein, we are always posing the following question: what happens if an AI agent goes out and perpetrates fraud end-to-end without a human in the loop, right? Which means that an AI agent actually goes and buys stolen credit cards or stolen credentials online on the dark web, and then creates a bunch of accounts using those, and then perpetrates fraud without a human in the loop at all. So in that world, what does fraud prevention truly look like? So that's one of the main questions I'll be answering today. So Warren Buffett has famously said that with the rise of AI, one of the biggest growth industries of all time is going to be fraud, right? And we are already seeing that when it comes to ID verification online, the very concept of verifying identities online is at stake. In fact, the very concept of trust on the internet is at stake, right? So these are some synthetically generated IDs that my team has generated using open source tools. And you can see that it's kind of like showing a progression from 24 till 26. In 2026, you can actually generate passports using these open source publicly available tools, which even have holograms, right? And now I'm going to take you through a couple of deepfakes that my team has been creating. So this is, again, an open source tool that we use, and it costs us a full $0 to create these deepfakes. And the person on the right is on our marketing team, and he's pretending to be Elon Musk. But the key thing you will notice is that the video here is still a little lagging. It's still a little jarry, right? And now this is 6 months ago, right? The person on the left is one of our fraud fighter colleagues, and he's pretending to be, again, Elon Musk. But now you can see there's actually a lot of smoothness in the motion. And in fact, the performance of these deepfakes is just doubling, right, very quickly. And now this is actually, a couple of weeks ago. So this is my chief of staff, and he is essentially, pretending to move the hands of one of his CBS News LA anchors. And in fact, we went live on TV for CBS LA News, and we actually deepfaked her. And she was actually thrilled because we converted her into Taylor Swift. She still talks about it today, right? And in fact, the other fun thing we do, if any of you ever hop into a demo with me or anyone on my team, we often, show you real time over a Zoom call how we can deepfake you. We just take your picture during the Zoom call with just that one picture, and then we can actually deepfake you in the video call. I have shown up in Zoom calls pretending to be the person who is actually joining the call as well. So now I'm actually going to take you through a very interesting fraud attack, which my chief of staff created. And this type of vulnerability, it exists in hundreds of platforms, and it's actually being used by attackers right now, right? So first and foremost, my chief of staff, what he did was, he essentially proceeded to create a Tinder profile for me without telling me. Don't tell my wife. However, when he created this Tinder profile, he verified my my identity, right? And I'll take you through the whole journey. But there were lots of red flags, lots and lots of red flags, because he used a jailbroken iPhone. He also, installed active malware on that iPhone, and then with that same device, he created 10 other accounts before, right? So, and then he actually used a proxy, right, to actually create my account. And while he was using proxy, he was sitting in the US, but the IP location of the proxy was South Africa. But he's actually in the US. And now let's actually take a look. This will be a couple of minutes of a video, right? So first and foremost, he's actually going to create my Tinder profile, right, using essentially, images that he finds online, right? And then he unleashed his creativity. I need to really go to the gym. And now he's going to take his picture, right, for the actual selfie verification part in Tinder, right? And that same selfie verification, lots of banks are using today, right? But in the selfie, he's going to pretend to be Mona Lisa. So now it's my Tinder profile with my images, but the selfie is his picture looking like Mona Lisa. So you see the mismatch over here, right? The mismatch here is that no one actually looked at the fact that this profile picture and the selfie doesn't match with any of the profile pictures, right? That was the first giveaway. But the second giveaway is that none of those other telemetry signals, device fingerprinting signals, actually triggered, right? Cool. So as you can see, the key message over here that I want to share is that this type of vulnerability exists in all systems today, right? And the key here is that at a meta point, identity verification online, you cannot really trust it anymore if you were just looking at whether a person is moving their face side to side, et cetera. You have to actually tie an identity verification online with a strong device binding, right? As in, was this a real device that he used to create this identity? No, not really, right? It was, as we shared earlier, he used a proxy. He was sitting in the US, but pretending to be in South Africa. He used a jailbroken device. He had malware on his device. He had the same device ID was used to create 10 other accounts. So actually, the truth here is that you shouldn't even need to look for ID verification. You should actually be looking at, is this even a real device that you're using? And then the second thing, when we are doing these deepfake Zoom calls or Sardine, we also provide identity verification tools. When banks and fintechs are using our ID verification, we're not only looking at whether you can move your face side to side, we're looking at when you're presenting this selfie, are you actually using a real device, right? Or is it an emulator? Or is the device actually face down and you have somehow jerry-rigged a whole setup and you're injecting a video back into the webcam, right? So we're looking for those telltale signs. So the bottom line here is identity verification online, you need to have strong device binding together with ID, right? But now, let's actually take a look at what that actually means, for banks and fintechs, right? So with the rise of AI, fraud and scams have skyrocketed, but at the same time, banks are being asked to, cut costs, right? So something has to change, right? And how can we actually fight back, right? And in that regards, right? So remember one of the other questions I posed earlier was that what happens if there's a truly autonomous AI agent perpetrating fraud, right? So we actually have an example here where one of our customers, the CISO of this customer, they called us up on a Friday evening saying that, hey, we have a massive spike in account signups. This customer, they provide health-saving accounts in the US, which are like, basically an employer-provided benefit in the US. And everybody gets like, let's say, $5,000 worth of spend that they can do on healthcare-related expenses. But what had happened was that for thousands of employers that this HSA provider works with, identities of employees at those employers were stolen, right? So, and then about 150,000 accounts were being created in the matter of a couple of days, right? So a massive spike in account creation, right? And the question I posed to my team was, to my AI team was, with attacks like this, could you actually detect these attacks and prevent them without waking up a human, right? Because at that time, of course, he called us up on a Friday evening and we all jumped in, and then we actually quickly realized the attack pattern, right? So I'll give you an example of what we did then. So in this case, let's actually take a look at this GIF video over here. In this case, what had happened was that the attacker, when they created these 150,000 accounts, every attacker, they make a mistake. So we like to say at Sardine that every fraudster has a tell, right? In this case, the tell was that they used the same device fingerprint to create all these accounts, right? The second tell was that their true location, because they were using a proxy or a VPN, and the true location was not in the US. They were actually sitting in UAE or Switzerland, right? And at Sardine, with our device fingerprinting, we can actually pierce through proxies and VPNs and find the true location behind it, right? So those were the two tells. So now I could have woken up my data scientist on a Friday night and asked them to actually, hey, can you identify other device fingerprints which look the same? But instead, at that time, my AI team was actually building a data analyst agent. So I just prompted my data analyst agent to actually do that investigation for us, right? So in this case, the GIF video, it'll circle up. But the query I gave it was that, hey, this is the attack pattern that we have discovered. One device fingerprint being reused to create all these accounts, and the true location behind a proxy or VPN is outside the US. Now, can you go and find other fingerprints which look the same, right? So actually, I'll go back here. So this, then our data analyst agent wrote a bunch of queries. And this chart here, you don't really need to understand too much here, but the main bottom line is each of these are fingerprints on the x-axis. And on the y-axis is number of distinct customers using that fingerprint. And the other key thing here is that only the ones which are in orange are the ones that matter, because the other ones, like the second, the third, the fifth, et cetera, they don't really matter, because for those fingerprints, the true location was not outside the US. It was in the US, right? Because it turns out that lots of folks at nursing homes, et cetera, doctors and nurses, they all actually truly use the same device, right? They all share a device. So therefore, AI was actually pretty successful at not only giving us the device fingerprints that matter, and also, very quickly we were able to block that attack, right? So now the bottom line here is that in this case, I could have woken up my data scientists. It would have taken them a couple of days or a couple of weeks to actually do the investigation. It was done by AI in 5 minutes, right? So now with the advent or with the rise of AI-generated fraud and scams, I think we should be able to fight back. Right now, of course, we had to prompt the AI agent to do things, and we reduced the time from a couple of weeks to 5 minutes. But our goal at Sardine is to actually not even have a human in the loop. I want to fight fraud without waking up any humans, and let's actually talk about how do we get there, right? We also have other types of AI agents. So for example, here is an AI agent which is investigating a money mule ring for us. This is a money mule ring we busted for one of our largest bank customers. And in this case, as you can see, every fraudster has a tell. This money mule ring, turns out this fraudster had created hundreds of accounts using one device and then had used another device, which he thought he was being very clever, but then using that same device, we jumped through multiple hops and found that there's actually another 100 users. So therefore, we were quickly able to block this ring, right? And now, this is how our graph analyst agent works. You actually just give it a prompt. I made it analyze my connections graph. I create a lot of fraudulent accounts for testing. So it quickly connects me. This is my real identity, because I do have real accounts as well at banks, but it's connecting me via my phone number to all these other John Doe accounts I have created, right, automatically. So now what I'm taking you through are these building blocks, and I'll connect all of them. So we talked about data analyst agent. We talked about the graph agent. Here is a rule recommender or rule assistant agent. In our case, one of the common themes we find is, a fraud analyst, they don't really know all the features available to them to create rules quickly. Inside Sardine, we have 10,000 features, right? And no one can actually remember all of them. So now that's where a rule assistant agent comes in super handy. You could actually just talk to it in natural language. It'll create a rule for you. It'll backtest the rule and tell you how many times it'll fire, et cetera, et cetera. Its precision and recall, all without you needing to know SQL, right? But now, I've shown you the building blocks. How do we connect these building blocks so that we can actually fight fraud at machine speed, right? So first and foremost, the most important thing is that you have to get all your data in one place, right? No AI model will succeed at doing any fraud investigation unless it has access to all your data, right? The second thing I want to share, and I'll go back here, for that fraud attack that I shared with you, remember in my case, I had to actually still prompt it, right? Saying, hey, this is the prompt, and now go find other fingerprints which look like it. But now we are at the stage where we have several building blocks, right? We have an anomaly detection agent, which will automatically discover those tells, those anomalies. It'll give those anomalies to the data analyst agent, which will do a further deep dive by writing SQL and finding other users who look like that. Then it'll hand over to maybe a graph agent to do the graph analysis, and then finally hand it over to a rule assistant agent to actually write rules. So if you get the idea here, we can actually chain these agents together and have an end-to-end fraud fighting agent, which does not need to wake up humans. So we are getting there. We're not quite there yet, but we will be there by the end of this year to have this whole thing run autonomously, right? So having said that, now going back, right? In order to, how do we enable everyone to do things like that, right? The most important thing, as I was saying, is you got to get all your data in one place. And it doesn't just have to be transaction data. It has to be your identity data, your device data, transactional data, as well as all your, workflow data, for all your queues and, alerts, et cetera, right? Then the second thing is you need to have agents which are given a very well-defined, narrowly scoped job, right? If you remember when I talked to you about all those different agents, each of those agents that we have, the rule assistant agent, the data analyst agent, they have a very narrowly defined scope. Because if you give an agent, too wide of a scope, then they might hallucinate, right? So that's the second part. And then, of course, the third thing is that you need to have a workflow like tool which actually chains these agents together. That's what I'm showing you here over there, right? And this is basically, just in visual mode, exactly as I described earlier. The anomaly agent fires the data agent, which fires the rule assistant agent, which then automatically applies the rules, and that's how you have an end-to-end fraud investigation, right? Now, one last thought before I end the talk. So, of course, when we work with fraud ops and compliance ops teams as well, oftentimes one of the questions they ask us is how can they actually stay ahead? How can they have job security, right? Because of course, like for all fraud investigators, they're concerned like anyone else with the advent of AI, whether those jobs are going away. Honestly, my thought over there is that no, the jobs are not going away, right? This is just a new skill set that fraud investigators now get access to. Now, like when I was leading fraud teams at both Coinbase and Revolut, I had both data scientists and ops, right? And my data scientists, they were great at doing data analysis, but they didn't have the sixth sense to find fraud. And my fraud ops people, they had an amazing sixth sense to fight fraud, but they could never write SQL. So I had to teach each of them the opposite skills. Now, the interesting thing is with the types of AI agents that I showed you here today, like the data analyst agent, et cetera, actually it gives fraud ops teams like a superpower that they didn't have before, which is they can actually become SQL ninjas without needing to know SQL. So imagine if you give these people who have the super spidey sixth sense to catch fraud, you give them the best tools, imagine what can they do, right? So therefore, my thought here is that the jobs are not going away. Everyone is going to get smarter, right? That's basically it. Feel free to reach out to us. I have several team members here in the audience today. If you all please don't mind raising your hands. Yeah, so Clyde, Jen, Lisa, please come find us. We'll be here pretty much all day. Clyde leads all of go-to-market sales for us here in Canada, based out of Toronto. Lisa is also based out of Toronto. She's our head of AML solutions. And Jen is a Canadian as well. Where are you now? Calgary, and she's on our commercial team as well. Please come find us. I don't know how much time I have, Tal, for questions.
Yeah, we have a little bit of time if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm happy to shout. Thanks for this, by the way. Curious how you anticipate the next evolution of fraud that you haven't seen yet.
Oh yeah, so that's where I was going with that. I strongly believe that I don't know if that 150,000 fraud ring was actually fully automated, but I strongly believe the next one will be fully automated. Like the AI agent is actually going to the dark web, finding stolen identities, stolen cards, and just creating accounts immediately autonomously, right? Yeah.
Hi, two questions. So overnight, when you can't wake the data scientist, how much does your false positive rate increase during that time period? And the second question is the 150,000 new account creations. For those client sites, were there CAPTCHAs involved to add friction to that account creation process or not?
Great questions. Yeah, of course, the false positive and the detection rate part is actually has to be thought through very carefully. What I didn't show you here, but the rule assistant agent, what it does is actually calculate the rule fire rate as well as precision and recall. Precision and recall we can only calculate if our customers are giving us feedback data back, right? So most of our customers give us historical feedback data. Like for signups, they'll tell us which accounts they froze after signups. For logins, they'll tell us which accounts were actually successful at inputting their password or failed. Or for card transactions, they'll tell us which transactions led to disputes, right? So we have very good feedback data. So therefore, we can always tell you precision and recall before you push the rule live to production, right? What was the second question?
For the 150,000 account
CAPTCHAs.
Creation incident, for the client sites that were created or breached, let's say, how many of them had CAPTCHAs to slow it down?
Yeah, I think some of them had, definitely had CAPTCHAs, right? And I think what we are finding is that AI is actually pretty good at solving for CAPTCHAs, right? So, yeah, exactly.
We have time for one more.
Yeah.
First of all, congrats to you and the whole team on your partnership with National Bank of Canada. That's huge. Love to see that.
Thank you.
My question's around, do you think the threat of fraud within the context of onboarding and verification will ever get so severe that banks that are heavily investing into these digital capabilities will start to peel back their investment because it's just getting too difficult to fight that and win that fight?
No, I don't think that'll ever be the case. Fraud at the end of the day is a numbers game. You do want to have a little bit of fraud always, right? Because if you had zero fraud, then guess what? You probably added so much friction that nobody loves your customer experience, right? So most of the banks we speak with, they are comfortable having some amount of fraud, right? And of course, like fraud is just a cat and mouse game, right? Like there's always going to be newer tools that fraudsters will have access to. And hopefully what I showed you here today is a reflection of what the industry or the fraud fighting industry is capable of doing as well to prevent those types of fraud attacks, right? Yeah. Cool.
Okay, Soups, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, Tom. Yeah.